Welcome to the Future is Foster podcast, powered by Raise a Child. I'm your host, Nancy Mogi. I was adopted at 17, and I'm ready to talk all things foster and adoption. Someone has to. This week on The Future is Foster, we are joined by Mark Daley, a social activist, entrepreneur, and foster-turned-adoptive father. In his most recent book, Safe, a memoir of fatherhood, foster care, and the risks we take for family, we embark on an emotional journey as Mark and his partner Jason navigate the foster care system with hopes of adoption and the heartwarming heartbreak that can occur when foster children are reunified with their biological family. Through brutal lessons about sacrifice, acceptance, and healing, Daley shares the challenges and joys of becoming a parent, showing us that timing is everything. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Future is Foster podcast. It's your host, Nancy Mogi. We are here powered by the Raise a Child organization with one goal in mind: to spread the amazing, the truthful, the honest, and the groundbreaking stories of all the people within the foster and the adoption system. And you always hear about the horrible stories on the news, and I get it. You know, they want to put the big headlines out there. But when you're also looking at those headlines, you see the true change makers and the leaders and the people that are not only watching what's going on, they're doing something about it. And I'm so happy to be sitting here with the one and only social activist, change maker, author, Mr. Mark Daley. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. That was quite a nice intro.
Ooh, okay,
Appreciate it.
Good. I worked on it. It was not improvised. But, you know, this is the first time I'm interviewing someone that I don't already know. And even one of the other foster to adopt fathers we spoke with, we've had multiple conversations with. But my first impression with you was, okay, we emailed, but I've also been fortunate enough to listen and read your amazing book, Safe, a memoir of fatherhood, foster care, and the risks we take for family. And I know, like, when you meet a celebrity, you're like, oh, like, you know them, but they don't know you. But you really shared all the depths of your life in this book. And I'm going to try not to jump over things because the audience should know them too. But if you really love this story and this interview, like, this book is really what's going to show you just, I don't even know, I'm like at a loss for words. It's going to show you the good and the bad and the beautiful of family. It's literally a family. So thank you so much, Mark.
Thank you. I appreciate it. You know, my agent said to me early on, if you're going to do this and it's going to be good, you're going to have to get really, really raw and really vulnerable. So
Yeah.
That's what I went with.
Absolutely. So I know you because I've read the book. Maybe some people have read the book or they've seen you been an activist for all of these years. But for those who don't know you, I want to take it back from day one. Describe to us your experience as a child with your family. What was it like?
Sure. Well, I grew up outside of Boston in a
Okay.
very working class, city. And, it wasn't, as I'm gay. And at the time I was really struggling with this idea of coming out because it wasn't really that welcoming of an environment. Now, thankfully, I have a family that couldn't have been more welcoming and accepting, but that
There's a
wasn't the
whole
case.
world out there that was not.
Exactly. The 80s wasn't really that great of a time, and the early 90s in that sense too, And there was a lot of fear. You turn on the news in the 80s and what you see for gay people is they're dying of AIDS.
Yeah.
And I didn't want that for my future, and that was what I thought the future was for gay people because I didn't know any adults who were gay.
And I'm sure, like, specifically right now, we have the media, we have a podcast where you can talk about it, but there really was not a lot of good things about the LGBTQ community on the television, in the newspapers, in the magazines, on the radio. So I'm sure that was hard for you to realize that part of yourself, but also admit it to the people around you.
Yeah, I think, I didn't honestly come out till I was about 24, 25 years old.
Wow.
And I think, ultimately then it was because I had fallen in love and thought, well, I got to share this now.
I'm not going to love anyone
Now's
else
the
as
time.
much.
Yeah, now's the time.
That's beautiful. And specifically, did you always know you wanted to be a father?
No, in fact, I mean, when I grew up, I didn't know any gay dads, right? I
Mhm.
mean, or at least out gay that
Yeah.
and so there wasn't this idea that it was even possible for me.
You had to
So
have the mother and the father
yeah,
and everything. And that's most importantly what we are trying to change. There's no definition of the perfect family. And even those perfect families that we do see, they're not perfect. We all know. So you were fortunate enough to see these children within the foster system join your family. And you even mentioned yourself, they walked in the door and you weren't viewing them as a foster kid. You were viewing as, yay, I have another friend, I have another cousin. And
yeah,
I don't know if they ever had too much relationships with their birth family, but, in an ideal world, there is a kid that needs a home, an amazing set of parents can come and take them, and everything goes according to plan. But things didn't go according to plan so easy for you guys.
yeah. It's and in fairness to our trainers, they try to set you up for this, right?
Yeah.
They go in
It's
and they
about the kid.
And they tell you the truth. And the truth is the foster care system is designed to support reunification.
Hmm.
And the truth is it should be,
Yeah.
right? I
It
mean, we
should.
shouldn't be in the business of taking people's kids.
No.
The idea is that we go in and we're supposed to be there to help a family through a really difficult, arguably the most difficult time of their lives.
Yeah.
And that was, something honestly we weren't fully prepared for. We thought
Hmm.
that we would get a baby that was abandoned and we would be able to swoop in and have this beautiful life together. And when we entered into a situation where we ended up taking in two little boys who were 3 months and 13 months old, they were brothers. And when that happened, to us, we thought we had this instant family and this was great and we were going to, live forever together. And then the next day, a grandmother called. And you could hear this voice on the other end of the phone that was in some ways she was relieved knowing that they were already loved and cared for
Safe.
and safe, right? But on the flip side, it was like she had a son and a daughter-in-law who were going through a lot.
Mhm.
And they weren't bad people. They aren't bad people.
Yeah.
They're people in a bad situation. And our job wasn't to just keep these kids safe. Our job was to help them reunify with their parents.
Absolutely. And I think that's a good thing to share with that. It is, you don't just get the kid and you adopt,
Right.
And I mean, there's some agencies that maybe it's that easy, but I don't think so. But specifically, the foster system is made to reunify families, to save families. And you said a quote that I absolutely love, and it really spoke volumes to me. And it was, the system meant to protect children from harm ironically required them to be harmed in order to intervene. It was baffling. And you knew going in that the children you guys would get would had to have gone through some form of trauma to land with you guys. And you were ready to help them and nourish them and, lift them up. Specifically for me, I have certain biases because I was 13 years old when I was put with this family that had already known of me and had opened their doors for me. And I knew from a very young age that I had a horrible home life. I knew my biological mother was, not fit to be a mother, not fit to be a caretaker, and, didn't love me for me. She loved me for the control aspect. And with a lot of instances of neglect and abuse, as soon as I saw a way out of it, because I had this amazing family that loved me and were putting everything into me, I still had to fight in the court for 6 years, convincing the court that my biological mother was undeemed to be a parent. Even after a therapy session where she threatened to kill me, even after her showing up to my graduation, threatening to shoot up the place, even after all the threats, it's really hard for children to show abuse and to say, okay, that kid is abused or that kid's in an unfit scenario that they need to be removed. And specifically in your situation, the whole goal was, yes, you wanted to keep them, but you wanted the parents to be able to heal and to grow. And you've seen what healing has done for people around you. I was getting so angry when I was listening to your Audible as I was doing my laundry and going about stuff because I was rooting for you and I was rooting for you and Jason. And I was like, look, that's a perfect home. I was rooting for the boys. But then you would chime in and be like, it's not about us. We are here to provide a safe space and a safe home and a safe transitionary period. And you, even just like you said right now, the parents aren't horrible people. They're people that have gone through pain. And there's a trend of people that if they go into the system at one point in their life, they most likely will have children that go back in. So I'd love for you also to break down a little bit of how you coped with those feelings of, there's something you want, but then there's something that needed to happen.
I can't start on to answer that without addressing your story, and thank you for sharing that. I mean, with everyone, I know that and that must have been really hard for you to go through. So appreciate you saying.
I mean, we're here
sharing that.
now,
Yeah.
so
No,
so it's easy on this part.
yeah. No, I think that I didn't deal with it very well. I think, I got into it with the mindset of like, we wanted to adopt, right? And then.
And you're very honest about that in the
Yeah.
book.
I mean, you have to be, right? I mean, that was the truth. And there wasn't someone telling me that like there was this, slam dunk case we were going to get.
Yeah.
I just in my head thought, we know the questions to ask. It's going to work out. It's going to work out. And then you get in and you meet this family and you see that, again, they're not bad people. They're people in a bad situation. And at first, they're not doing anything and you're like, well, this is going to end the way that I thought. And then they start to do stuff and you're like, well, wait a minute. And what kind of person would I be if I was rooting against them? I never rooted for them to fail. I didn't want,
You were rooting for the children.
Exactly. But my concern was if they went home, would they be safe? It wasn't about what can they give them in the form of, material things or even the love. I didn't doubt their love for their children.
Would they be back in the system?
But would they watch them in the bathtub and make sure they don't drown? Would they, make sure that they don't stick their fingers in a light socket? Yeah. Like, I didn't know. And that was really hard for me to deal with throughout the process. I think it's foster care. I always say this. I'm like, there's a crisis level need for foster parents. A lot of people should do it, but we don't need everybody. And so it's not for everybody. There's things everyone else can do to support them.
Absolutely. Yeah. And even right now, I am not in a place in my life where I think I am ready to foster, to adopt, but I spend my time working with the organization. I'm making media, I'm talking, I'm sharing. And there's so many amazing things people can do, whether they're a big brother, big sister, whether they're an ally, whether they're just opening these conversations and having this flow of dialogue. And specifically with those two boys that you got so attached to, and I'm sure they absolutely adored you guys. It was not their life path to be your kids. Right. And that must have been heartbreaking, shattering. I was ready to throw my phone against the wall listening to the Audible, like, what the I was like, what? But you were so good at saying what you were feeling, and then also going back to you were still there to help them during those moments of their life. And when did the next step happen of, okay, maybe we'll try again?
So I think, for your listeners, what happened was, and spoiling some of the book here, obviously, but we go through this long ordeal with them, and then we find out that the mom had appealed their original detention, saying they never should have been taken away.
Which is her right.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely her right. And she got an attorney assigned to her who did a fantastic job.
Yeah. I still have nightmares of my biological mother's attorney. He would go up on Twitter. I was just talking about it with my cousin. He would go up on my Twitter. I was 13 and I'd be posting rap lyrics and be like, see, she's a rebellious teen. And he'd convince the court that I was a rebellious teen, and it forced me to silence myself. And at the end of the day, he was doing his job. She was doing her job as a mother. And some people would have just walked away and not continued fostering to adopt after they put their life and soul into two baby boys.
Yeah. So when the boys went back, they went back because of her appeal, not because the parents had done the work that they were supposed to do to get them back. And we were so afraid that if they went back, they weren't going to be safe. Yeah. And so we tried to maintain a relationship with them for as long as we could to stay in contact in case if something happens. The parents would call us first, But they had a lot of distrust. Every time they went to the hospital, there was a CPS call on them. And, she didn't want to send them to daycare because they were mandated reporters. She had these natural fears that were understandable, for someone who'd gone through all that she had. And then, ultimately we waited. It was a little over a year, and we started talking about we're not getting younger. If we're going to do this, we have to do this soon. So should we go back to surrogacy? Because I don't think I can go through this again.
There's so much unknown, and even when it's with young boys or even if it's with a teenager that's able to speak up and, be able to put her foot down, the gut-wrenching anxiety. I remember I'd be sitting in class, having a panic attack because I'd know the next morning I'd have a court date, and this judge that never listened to me, never spoke to me, could completely change the path of my life, and everyone would have to just deal with it.
Meanwhile, how are you supposed to study for the science test?
No, I was failing all my No.
Well, that's the thing that I think is so lost with kids in foster care is is that as they're living through this,
Mm-hmm.
and these are just especially the older kids, but where am I going to be in a week? You want me to study for, or work on a
No.
term paper that's due the end of the semester? I might
Yeah.
not even be at the school by then.
Absolutely.
It's so challenging, all the kids the things that kids in foster care face that we don't even think about if we're not in that experience.
That's why there's such a low percentage of them being able to reach higher education, let alone graduate high school, and most importantly, with all that lack of stability, not end up incarcerated.
Yeah,
Because
or
sometimes
served,
they
yeah.
don't have other choices. They don't know any other path. Yeah.
On our situation, once we had waited over a year, and I woke up one day to a text message from a girlfriend of mine that was finalizing her adoption, and her adoption caseworker had come to the house and said, just in conversation, mentioned we have these 3 kids that were just assigned to my caseload.
Yeah.
Because once you're in the system, you have a foster care caseworker, and then once it's clear that you're not going home, they add an adoption worker in.
Yeah.
And so she said, and the sad thing is, here in Los Angeles County, because there's 3 kids, I'm never going to find them a home because no one in LA
right,
has a house big enough to keep them all together. And they had moved them way out, like 3 hours out of LA.
What was the age range?
2, 5, and 6.
Oh my gosh.
And so my girlfriend mentioned Jason and myself to her, and she said, so the text said, I hope you don't mind, but, I'm not even sure if you're ready for this or what you're thinking, but... And so I kind of just saw it and didn't think about it again. And then Jason came home for lunch, and I'm like, I got this text from Devin. What do you think? And he was like, well, let's find out their story. And then, a day later, we were put into a potential match, which is like the foster care equivalent of, as exclusive dating.
Yeah.
Right? Where we can't be matched with anybody else. They can't be matched with anybody else.
Reunification services are completely terminated.
Right. At this point. And so then we ended up, going, meeting them, falling in love immediately. They moved in, after doing a couple of visits and that sort of stuff. And, we proceeded heading towards adoption. And then about 10 months after they were there, we got the call that we expected from the county, which was that the boys and their then younger sister, because they had had another child, were now in foster care, and would we take them as well?
Oh my gosh.
So would we have 6 children, 3 of whom might be leaving us to go back to the same parents, and ultimately we decided not to.
No, and I
Because
think
it
you
just-
had a prior obligation to these 3 initial siblings that you had already devoted so much time, and you needed to protect them. And I'm sure the young boys, when they get older, they would understand too, as parents, as foster parents, as leaders, as the adults in the situation, it wouldn't be fair for the kids you already committed to.
And honestly, it wouldn't have been fair to them, I don't
Yeah.
believe. I think that they were coming from a situation where they've been exposed to a lot more trauma.
Yeah.
And
Oh my
because of that, they were going to require some extra care. And 2 parents with 6 kids probably couldn't do the best service.
Especially
them.
newer parents. You had
Oh,
only
yeah, I
been,
mean,
it'd been a couple
yeah.
years. It's not like you were seasoned, you had like a whole batch off to college.
I say that all the time. I'm like, we weren't just first-time foster parents. We were first-time parents.
Yeah.
Like when, there was a situation where like one of the older baby fell, and like hit his head, and we'd like race him to the ER, and of course he's fine. We're
Yeah.
completely overreacting. And so we had called the caseworker, and then left a voicemail. We left her an email. I was sending her text messages. I didn't hear back from her for 3 days.
Yeah.
And of course I'm like, I can't believe I don't hear back. And when I do hear back, she said, look, I'm sorry, that it took me so long to get back to you, but I currently have 45 cases on my caseload. I was chasing down an Amber Alert, and not for 1 second did I worry about the competence of you and your husband.
Yeah.
I was like, well, thank you.
Yeah,
You're right.
thank
You were
you.
doing the right thing. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And also, something you mentioned in the book is like some people, if you're giving birth to a child or even going through surrogacy, you have that 9-month period of like,
Oh, yeah.
okay, let's absorb as much knowledge as possible. Let's read the parenting books. Let's figure it out. But you guys, essentially like, knock, knock, here's some babies.
Well, and you also know, like, when you're having a baby, when you're birthing a child, generally the size it's going to be, and like, hey, if in our case, obviously we wouldn't be breastfeeding, so like, what kind of formula, and you can sort of navigate that system. We're going to need some onesies and whatever else. But for us, we had said ages 0 to 3. So is that sippy cups or bottles? Is that a crib? Is it a high chair? Is it a bassinet? Like, so we just didn't have a lot of stuff because we didn't know what we'd need, And then I remember the day they arrived was hysterical. We had said, I had like cleared my calendar for the entire month of June. I'm like, I'm not going to travel. I'm just going to, but there was one day I had committed to going to Stanford to speak. And it was like, so I went up and of course that was the day that we got the call. So we got the call at 1. By 5 o'clock in the afternoon, we had 2 kids, and I didn't get home till 10 o'clock at night, and racing in the house. And when I get there, it looked like Babies R Us had just thrown up all over my kitchen. It was like binkies and wrappers and all this other stuff, and then there was a high chair that was like filthy, just covered in food, sitting in the corner that I don't know where it came from.
Oh my gosh. And, we're talking about a lot of the truths and all this stuff, and our goal is not to dissuade or to push people away from the system. I must say that too, and I get in a habit sometimes of that. Our goal is to share the truths and the honesty so that when you do hear these stories and you do see these families, you do feel like, okay, well, maybe there's some way in my job, my career, my passions, that I can just dedicate a little bit of my time to help those kids get adopted.
I also think it's just, in part, I share all that too, because in part of that, it's the fun of it, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's like being a parent and being kids just have a natural way of bringing you down, like in a good way, like bringing you down to their level and humanizing you. When you start to take yourself too serious, some kid throws Cheerios on you. Like, it's just all that stuff that happens is just hilarious, and it's fun, and it's exciting, and
it's driven your advocacy work. I'm sure that after experiencing everything you did, like your speeches are probably just boom, hitting home because you experienced it firsthand, not just through watching your cousins, but through being the foster parent, dealing with, the unfortunate unorganization of the system. And, it's for the social workers, like we'd get pissed too, but it'd be like, they have so many people they're dealing with. Like they can't, even if they had every minute of every day, there's always going to be an influx of kids. And you said a quote that meant a lot to me as well, that more than 400,000 American children are in foster care on any given day, to roughly the same population as the number of residents of Miami, Florida. And through all the statistics I've read, I've been trying to equate it to like football stadiums. When you said Miami, I was just like, that's how we're gonna nail them. But throughout all of that, and you did welcome in new children, 3 amazing siblings that needed a home, did not have another home or a family that was unfortunately able to be available for them. I want to hear about them. How has fatherhood been since then?
Oh, it's fun. They moved in with us in February of 2019, and then we finalized our adoption during the pandemic. We were supposed to do it a little earlier, but it was delayed. But that was all well and good.
Okay.
We didn't have the courtroom scene. We got an email one day, which was like, "Hey, by the way, it happened 2 weeks ago. Congratulations."
Hot bottles, literally.
It was really, but it was a little anticlimactic on that end. But at that point, the one thing about the pandemic I think that was really interesting for us is they had been living with us for just over a year when, we started to homeschool and all that other stuff that all these families in America face.
Parenting isn't hard enough. You add the level of the pandemic as well.
But I will say, for us as a family, aside from all of the people dying and being sick and all that stuff around the world, in our little bubble, in our home, the 5 of us, there was a really special beauty to the pandemic.
You had the family you always wanted.
And we had time together that we didn't have. Everybody got to find their place, and where do we fit in, and how do we belong to one another, and how do we connect to one another, and there was a real beautiful side to the pandemic for the 5 of us.
That's beautiful. And I'm so inspired by not only just the type of father that you have become, and, I know I have never met your husband. I feel like I know him because of the book. So I'm a big fan, but specifically that even after you got this amazing family, and some would say a happily ever after, you're not done speaking up about this. You're, if anything, more fired up. You wrote this book. You let it inspire you. And I just hope that everyone watching this, please go to the link, the bios below and everything to keep up with Mark and to keep up with your amazing work. And there's so many different ways for people to get involved and help, even if you're not ready to be a foster parent, even if you're just going to be there for your friend that's fostering to adopting. So as a former foster youth that was adopted, I look up to you for being the people that believe in us. As someone who wants to be a parent, I look up to you as seeing your resiliency. And I know it's a lot seeing what my parents had to go to. It really makes me appreciate them as well. When you mentioned how you would have dropped everything just to see a social worker, I would be complaining about it. My parents, they had lives, they had stuff to do. I was just a teenager, so they really had to drop everything they're doing. So thank you so much, Mark. And thank you guys for listening and watching, and please click all the links below to learn more about Mark and his work. Please read and listen to the amazing book, Safe, and keep up with the Raise a Child organization to learn more about resources to get involved. Thank you. Let's roll the credits. The Raise a Child organization for supporting foster youth. Max Fogelman, executive producer. Mike Delay at Real Voice LA, audio engineer. Akash Kunver, editor and audio production. Georgie Christo, editor and short-form content specialist. Ahud Schechter, theme song producer. Ad-Large Media for hosting and distribution. And to our listeners, thank you for making the future foster.